Cool. So moving into the triads, what we do first. So our triads are based on the intelligence center we use first and use most. So first we have our thinking triad, so the head center people. These are people who are extremely analytical. They're very, they can often be very organized, though not all the time. They're great planners. These are people who have often felt analysis paralysis. Do you guys know what that is? Like too many choices or like too much thinking. And they're people who spend a lot of time thinking and planning before they do anything, before they allow themselves to feel anything. And each one of these triads experiences life through what I call an emotional filter. So basically everything that they're drawing in, everything they're experiencing, and everything they're putting out has kind of this tint over it. Like if you suddenly put on like colored sunglasses. For the thinking triad, that emotional filter is fear. A lot of times this plays out in anxiety. So people with a lot of anxiety tend to be in the head triad. Not always. There are plenty of people with, clinical anxiety who are not in the head triad, but everything that the people in the head triad are experiencing kind of gets filtered through this idea of fear. And each one of the numbers, so there's 3 numbers in this triad, and each one of them is experiencing and dealing with fear in a different way. One of them is trying to be competent, so they're like drawing in everything they can to make sure they always have enough and make sure that they're always ready to meet the challenges that are coming towards them. One number is kind of always planning for the future in a worst case scenario sort of way. These are the people who are ultra prepared. They don't just have a plan B, they have a plan like C through Z. They're like, yes. Like I once heard a teacher say that if the ceiling of your house ever fell through, you'd want to call this number because they have a plan for that. Does the ceiling of their house ever fall through? No. Do they need that plan? Absolutely not, but they have it. And then one of the other numbers is always thinking and moving and looking to the future to avoid feeling trapped. So these are people, a lot of times they bring the life of the party, and they might they kind of chronically overbook their schedule so that they can kind of hop to whatever thing they want to do when they want to do it. Like they might make plans with you and then be like, well, this was fun, but now I want to go hang out with her because that's going to be more fun. And I want to like have more fun and more fun and more fun. So you can tell the way that they're dealing with this fear of being trapped or incompetent or unprepared, is different for each number. Is anybody like resonating strongly with that? So we got some like hands like shooting up. Okay, awesome. And then we move into the feeling center, so the heart triad. These are the people who are all feelings. These are all feelings people. These are people who walk into a room and they immediately know they can read the emotional pitch of a room immediately. It's like they're swimming in it. These are people who know what people want and what people need, and they know how to give it to them. Do they always? No. Sometimes, yes. These are people who are extremely empathetic and relational. These are people who really want to be connected with you and know where they stand with people. They can be moody and over the top. So you'll start to notice that like for all the good things about an Enneagram type, there's also bad things. And that tends to be where we figure out most about the Enneagram, is like the things that make us go, oh, I do that. I don't want to admit to doing that, but I do that. For the thinking triad, it's that analysis paralysis, just like complete overthinking. For the feeling triad, it's this over-the-top emotionality. These are people who can have drastic mood swings, like pendulum one way to the other. But we all have our good things and our bad things. That's what this Enneagram is all about. Their emotional filter is shame. So everything that they're bringing in, everything that they're experiencing has to do with shame. And each one of these numbers deals with shame in their own way. So one One number really wants to make themselves invaluable. They want to be seen as the most helpful. Like you couldn't possibly live without this number. That's what this number wants you to believe. So these people are extremely helpful. Being so emotional and like relatable, they know what people need often before those people know it. And then they're willing to meet those needs like that. One number wants to be seen as successful. They're kind of combating their shame by presenting themselves as the best at whatever they're doing. So they're really working hard to make sure that whatever room they walk into, they tune into that emotional pitch. They find it, and they're like, I'm going to be the best at that. So they walk into the PTA, and they're like, I'm the best PTA member that's ever been. They walk into the yoga studio, and they're like, I am the best yogi that has ever happened to the world. And then they go home, and they want to be the best son or daughter or parents. Wherever they are, they want to be seen as successful. And then one number is dealing with their shame by working to be unique or different in some way. So not necessarily best, but definitely different. They want to set themselves apart. And this means that they can be incredibly artistic. They can be very, very creative. They tend to, whatever room they're in, they tend to stand out. Sometimes in a good way and sometimes not in a good way, depending on how that number is feeling. So is anybody resonating deeply with heart triad stuff? We got some does, yeah. Nice. Cool, and then we move down to the doing center, the gut center, the body center. These are extremely action-oriented people. Often they will do things before thinking about them. And oddly enough, it tends to work out for them. This is a very lucky triad that can do things without necessarily thinking about it, and it's kind of okay. Not always, but a lot of times. These people are always moving, always doing things. They're very active, although sometimes they're not doing the right thing. They're not doing the things that they should be doing. And like I said, always moving, not always fast. But these people are also incredibly intuitive. So these are the people who will be faced with a question or a quandary, and they know exactly what to do. But they're not necessarily going to be able to show their work. Where they know the answer. Do they know why they know the answer? No. They couldn't tell you why, but they know that they're in it. They're right. Their emotional filter is anger. And these are people who, again, each one of them is dealing with anger in their own way. And for some of them, it doesn't particularly look like anger. But one number in this triad is kind of turning their anger inward. They have a really strong inner critic. And they're basically, they want to be right. And they want to be good. And anger, in case you haven't noticed, in our culture is not good or right. Most people frown on anger. And so this type has really internalized that and internalized their anger. And so all of their anger is kind of turned inward on themselves, and they're hypercritical, and they've got this voice in their head like, that wasn't good enough. That wasn't, you should have done this. You should have done it that way. And they tend to come off to other people as harsh or maybe overly critical. But that's definitely not their intention. It's just because they have so much pressure on themselves that it tends to seep out to other people. One of the numbers in this triad wants to forget their anger. They don't like anger, and so they just want to pretend that it's not there. They're not turning it inward. They're not turning it outward. They're just like, what anger? I'm not angry. Everything's great. But what starts to happen if you ignore anger long enough, it gets bigger, and it gets harder to ignore, and then it bursts out. And one of my favorite Enneagram teachers, Suzanne Stabile, talks about it like being a pressure cooker. There's all this pressure building up and building up and building up until suddenly, big explosion that often this number has no ideas coming. It surprises everyone around them, and it deeply surprises themselves. They didn't know they were angry until after they blew up. Just, whoa, I had no idea. And then there's one number in this triad who's very in touch with their anger and who's very comfortable with expressing their anger and can externalize it very easily. These are people who can be often seen as overbearing, or if they're women, they're the bitches in the office. They're totally okay with telling you what's wrong, and they don't have a problem with it. And they're like, you screwed up, and here's what you did, and it sucks, and don't ever do it again. And then they're over it. So it's kind of a flash in the pan. That tends to happen quite a bit, especially if they're not quite as self-aware, maybe not done enough yoga. Lots of flashes in the pan, but then they're done with it. So if you have an argument with this number, they're not going to hold on to it. They're not going to hold a grudge. They're going to be like, I was really upset, but let's go get beers. It's fine. No big deal. Anybody feeling body center resonating here?